with those done, we're now down to step 76, and we've got some additional lights to go on. One appears to be a clean bulb. There's like a clear bulb because it's painted silver, and one is being painted in 18, which is orange. So the other one is an indicator clearly. So that's the one we're going for, the box light one, and then that's the same on the back in step 77. Only this time we're orange and red. So I'm going to assume that's a brake light, not a reflector. So what we will do is we'll paint them green, then paint them white, I should say, then paint the silver, because there's a little, the bulbs are, the lenses are circular, and then they've got a metal cross. So I want to try and keep that in, which will be white on this. So we'll paint it white first, then paint the silver, then paint the colours on, come the time. But right now we need to clean up 2 D43s and 2 D44s. So let's find those. So it's 43s in the first of the 2 steps. And this will be important because the angles will be different, I would imagine. So those are the front ones. And then we've got 2 rear ones. Plop them down there. Right, so these should be easy to clean up as they're boxes. So whilst we've still got an ejector pin on that side, which helps me hold it, we'll utilise that. Okay, looking good. And then we'll nip that off and smooth that out. And with very small parts that you can barely hold and you're on a flat surface, sometimes that's the best way of, rather than trying to hold it and sand it. So there we go, just get the dust off. And rather than lose it, we'll glue it straight into place. I need some tweezers. Yeah, that's easy enough. Just check that's nice and straight. It's bedded in properly. The method they're using for part location, although it's fairly effective, what they do is they put this lump on and it's got chamfers on both sides, and if you're not careful you can get gaps because you can sit the part in and it looks in, but it's riding high on one of the chamfers, so you get a gap at one of the edges. So you do have to double check. It's not as positive. Oh, I've just found that other handle that went missing. It's not as positive as a peg in a hole, but it does work okay. There we go. So I'll do the back ones and then I'll come back to you when we're ready to move on. Right, I've just glued in the top piece, thinking I was filming it, and I wasn't. It fits really nicely in. We've just glued it into place. So that's as far as I can take that now ahead of painting. The turret, I've cut the little tabs off because it was quite tight with having paint on it as well. So that goes in lovely, lovely, lovely fit once we've sorted that out. So that is as far as we can go with the Ferret now until painting. So we've got the turret to build and we've got the sub-assembly, fuel tanks and wheels. So let's get on. Okay, so with that turret top installed, we can now go to the building the actual turret. We've done 1881 already. We have also added that part, but we've got some detail painting to do. So that bit there is the same colour as that bit which we haven't installed yet. So we've got step 82 to do next, and then we can do some detail painting. We've got cushions that need to be painted black, and then later on we've got the scope there that needs to be installed, and one or two other bits to get this built up and ready. It includes doing the gun. So we need to have a look at how we're going to paint, and whether we need to install the gun at this point like they suggest, or whether we can install it afterwards. So we need to do a bit of test building as well. So all sorts of bits and pieces to do, but I want to get to that point, and we'll start with finding E10. So E10 is this piece here. So it looks like a ammunition box lid to me. So 186 is brown. I'm going to use ICM's Saddle Brown for that, which is a decent match, I think, for the Humbrol colour. Because we've got paint and primer down, it's just perhaps too much for the glue itself to dissolve before it flashes off. So there we go, that's the lid on that. So that's ready for painting. Right, that's our ammunition box painted up. We're going to let that dry off, and then we can do a little bit of weathering on that. So the next thing is to paint up all these little cushions, which are all matte black. So just using the 1002 black from ICM for that. So lovely. These are lovely. If you've not tried these paints, they are lovely, lovely paints, thinnable by water. And they brush paint really well, and they go through the airbrush really well. I have done some videos on them, testing them. I got the box of 80 different colours, and we went through them all and tried them all in different ways, and the varnishes and stuff. So you can find that in my products playlist if you're interested. But you can see how lovely these paints are to work with. So we're just going to put down a first layer, and then we'll go back and do a second layer over them all. And you might think I'm using an overly small brush, but there is a little edge that we have to try and capture, and I don't want to use a bigger brush just because of that. We won't see any brush strokes by the time we've put 2 to 3 coats on. And because we've thinned it with water, the drying time is quicker than if we'd thinned it with thinners. And so we'll be, by the time we've painted everything once, we'll be able to start putting second coats down. Right, just further watered down the paint, we're going to go in and do a third, and this will be final coat. And we've heavily watered it down. You can see it's a lot thinner than it was, and that's just going to give us the ability to take out any brush marks. When it's watered down, sort of like a thick wash, if you like, it will just pool a bit and settle, and it won't leave any witness of the brush. There we go, that's those done. Right then, we have painted in the black, and it's a very black, if that makes sense. The ICM black, I mean, it is just pitch black. So that's 3 coats, hand painted as you saw. So my usual rule of painting is thick coat. That doesn't mean a thick coat, it means the thickest coat you're going to put on. So a properly thinned coat, but it will be the thickest. Then a slightly thinner coat, and then the thinnest coat, which, as you saw, was not much more than a thick wash, and that just gets rid of all of your brush stroke marks that you could leave if you just did 1 coat, for example, and you thought the coverage was right. You might well see some brush strokes. Right, so what we're going to do now is I've just rubbed this up the side of my nose, and we're just going to give it a rub, and what happens is that little bit of oil on your fingers just highlights some little bumps and lumps in the paint and the edges, and just gives it a look like it's been brushed against, worn, and so on. We did it earlier with the seats, so it's nothing different. But what it will also do is it'll make each one of these pads unique. There we go. Right, so that's that done. I appear to have not put any of the panel line colour on this part, and I also want to do the ammunition box. So whilst we are doing the ammunition box, we can do this. Okay, that's that one done. Okay, and that just gives it a nice sort of uneven look with, well, essentially what you're doing with panel line is creating false shadow, basically. So that's done. So that means we have done step 82 now, and in step 83 we are adding this part here, which goes into there like so. That's going to cover up all of that edge, I think. So let's get some glue on there and see how we get on. What am I going to use? Plastic Magic, I think. So it does go the full length. So I've just put some glue on, and that's allowing that to just get into the paint and lift it a little bit, and it'll flash off, but it's making the plastic tacky. There we go. So the second swipe of the glue will always sit on the surface. There we go, that's in. That looks good. And just a bit of belt and braces. There we go. So that's our first part in. So that's step 83. Step 84 is doing the same on the other side. Right, there's a lot of metallic paint on this, so I'm just going to take the metallic paint off because I don't want the glue brush to get metallics on it really. There was only a light dusting on the other one. Right, there'll be plenty on there now. So, yeah, that's in nicely. So that's our two sides in, and that completes step 84. Now 85 is building up the gun, which goes into this, which then goes into... So what I'm interested in is, once we've got the front plate on and this plate on, is it actually possible to mount the machine gun? Because ideally I'd like to be able to paint it without the machine gun in. Now, it's not a problem if we have to, we just mask it off, but it would be easier if we don't. So let's clean up the machine gun and have a play and see if we can get that in there. So we don't need to tidy it up, we'll just have a go with the putting the gun in and see what happens. No, that's not going to be possible, so we will have to paint and install the gun. Okay, so now we understand that. I need to clean up the gun and paint the gun. There's actually two parts to it, so we need part E9 as well, which is this part here. So I'll get them cleaned up, then we can assemble the gun and paint it. The instructions tell you to paint it black, but that's only because Humbrol don't have a gunmetal, so we will obviously do it gunmetal. Okay, the gun is cleaned up, both parts, and I've just drilled out the end of the barrel there, so that's going to look a lot better. It's not dead on centre, but it looks dead on centre. And at an arm's length, you can't even see it. So, yeah, spot on that. Right, so we have this to attach, which I'm quite sure seems to go on the side or something. Like that there. So it goes on that little flat. So if I put it down, place it on. A little bit of fluffy plastic there that's not coming off. I'm just going to melt that away. There we go. So that's our gun built up, and then it attaches into there and locks into place there like that. Brilliant. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the back end of the gun and not worry about the front end. We'll paint that after we've painted the white. So we can just wrap a little bit of masking tape around it, or maybe some mascal on it or something. So my next job is to get that painted. I'll tell you what we'll use. We'll use my Amati clamp. There we go, that should be fine for painting. So what we're going to do is we're going to go straight, we're not going to prime it, we're going to go straight to painting it in the gunmetal, although some of this needs to be in the green. Maybe we paint the green first, and then put the gunmetal over the top and sort of use it as a primer. So let's sort that out. There we go, there's a little bit of paint. And to thin it, I'm just going to dip my brush in the water and give it a mix. And yeah, needs a little bit more, I think. Just a tad more. Around about 50-50 is your mixing ratio. It says 40 to 60, so your average is 50. Now when you use this paint without a primer, you sometimes get some surface tension. So if you find that the paint is sort of gathering itself up on the part, a lot of people mistakenly think that is because there's release agent on there or greasy fingerprint or something like that. It's just surface tension within the paint. So what you need to do is just keep going over it until the surface tension breaks, like that. There you go. And that'll just stop that from happening. There we go. That has gone down lovely. No primer, straight on, no issues. I've not actually had any issues with the paint separating surface tension or anything like that. Right, we'll give that a moment to dry, and then we will come back to it and possibly give it a second coat. Right, I've given the gun a second coat of the green. It's gone down really well. These paints have really impressed me actually, and they are rapidly becoming my acrylics of first choice. They're just lovely. So just going to thin down the gunmetal a little bit. There we go. And whilst we've got the gunmetal out for painting the gun, we can actually do some of the vision ports on the hatches. So we can paint some of these in now. So I'm painting them gunmetal because it actually looks like reflective glass. Now I don't know whether there was a tint on these glass, amber or green or blue or something like that. But there you go. And when that dries, we'll give it a little whip over with some gloss, and that should look like dark glass vision port. So we've got several of these to do, but they won't take long. Right, that doesn't have one. That doesn't have one. Told you it wouldn't take long. These two do. Right, let's get this armrest or whatever it is painted up. Just checking all of my angles. You'd be amazed how easy, especially when you're using magnifying glasses, it seems to be easier to miss things somehow. Okay, that's our gun. So we need to do a little bit of weathering on that before we can install it. So we'll leave it in the vise for now. So I'm going to go and wash up, and then I'll come back to you when we're ready to do the next bit. Okay, time to do a spot of weathering on the back end of this gun so that we can then glue it into position and install it in the turret. So I'm using Panaline accent colour, the brown one. There's only 3 to my knowledge, brown, grey and black. We'll be using the grey when we paint the thing white. So I'm using the brown one on the green just to give me sort of a look of gathered dirt and a worn type of look. And there is some tiny details on here which will just pop out with this wash. Okay, it doesn't matter if you get any on the gunmetal, we are going to weather the gunmetal as well. But I am trying not to. There we go. Right. That's the brown done. Never looks as good when it's wet as it does once it's dried up. Right. And then of course on the gunmetal I'm going to use the black, which will darken it down a little bit, which is what it needs. Now I'm not going to metallize it with graphite powder or anything like that. We will probably do that with the gun barrel come the time. And then what I'm doing is I'm just dabbing it in places to give it a sort of a patchy, used look. Just a little bit of patination can really help. Plenty in the little opening for the ammunition. There we go. Right, I'm happy with that. One last thing we need to do, however. So I just want to go over the black, which is very matte, as we've said, and just give it a touch of satin varnish. Okay, so I'll just let that dry. That should give it a nice satin appeal. Right, that is the last bit done on the gun, so we can install that. So all of our paint is now dry on the gun, so we can look to install that now. So we've already test fitted it. We know the fit is lovely. So I'm just going to put a small amount of glue in, and we can then glue that plate into place. It says a small amount. That didn't quite go to plan. I'm just going to take some of that out a bit. Okay, that's in place. So I'll just leave that to dry. I was just double checking I have it the right way around. Sort of thing I do is put it in upside down. Don't notice till after it's dried. And I just want to take the glue off the mating surface here. So I'll get my knife. Let's get the glue out of the way. Put it in the right side will help, won't it? So that needs to go in there like that. So I need to take the paint off this surface instead. Okay, and then we can there we go, fit is lovely. Just managed to unseat the gun. Let's put that back in. Okay, so make sure that's sat properly, which I believe it is. Just make sure that gun's nice and straight. And we can put a little bit of glue down the sides because we've only glued it at the bottom there. Okay, and we can let that dry while that is drying. So that is steps 85 and 86 and 87 done. So step 88, we're installing this scope, which we've painted in the green when we painted the gun, and the gunmetal when we painted the gun. Now you can only fit this one way. If you try and fit it the wrong way around, it will not go in. So you can see internal parts that we need are all painted. So that's looking good, and we'll just put a little bit of glue just down the side bits there, just make sure that's making contact. A little touch at the front seam at the edge. Okay, now there's a little part that goes on which I'm guessing has got something to do with when this is opened, some form of stop or something like that, although it does seem to be a metal part. Fits into this little hole there, so we need E17. I'll get my knife out of the way before we have an accident. So E17 is, there it is. It's a funny little thing, that, whatever it is. So hook shaped with some bulges in it. Couldn't tell you what that was. Okay, right. So that sits in that slot there. So that goes in okay. Okay, that is on, so we can let that dry for a moment. So that completes step 88. Now in step 89 there's a little headrest that we need to add, which is E26. So it's this tiny part here, and that's going to need to be painted black. And that'll have to be painted before we install the roof, I think. That's a nice little detail. They could have easily have left that off and no one would have known. Okay. So let's just have a look at how that fits on. Right, so there's a little notch there in the aluminium. You can see there's a little notch and it's going to glue into there. That's definitely a job for the tweezers. Right, we'll let that dry and then we can give that a quick whip of black paint. So just looking ahead, we've also got some other parts that we're going to be sticking onto the edge side of this, so we could do that while that lot's drying, I think. So let's have a look at those. My parts are cleaned up. This is step 91. So we're doing this a little bit out of order. This top piece needs to go on first, but the paint is just drying on the little headrest there. So these little stoppers for when the hatch is folded forward, they go into this, and they've sort of got a little dimple on them which goes into that, into a little sort of triangular cutout. It's a bit of an odd way of doing it, really, but the dimple is nowhere near as big as the hole. but I'm guessing it won't be seen once the lid's on. And of course I'm putting this on before the lid, so it would look like it's making more sense with the lid on, I think, because you'd have a little cut out square rather than an open hole. There we go. I'll put that on the other side. There we go, done. Right, we have a little fit issue with the top plate here, which I haven't noticed previously. But when you line this up with the edge, so that should be lined up with that going down, and you pop this in, you get, I don't know whether that was movable, but I doubt it, because the gun would be movable. You have to sort of pop it down and then push it forward to make it engage properly. Otherwise, if you're not careful, you end up with a little gap there and you might not notice it. So be very, very careful with this part, because the fit is very, very tight, but you've got to get it in the right way. Otherwise it's not happening, because it's got little lips around the edge, and if they're snagging on there ever so slightly, you've got a huge gap. So let's get that glued in. I'm just gonna hold it down a sec while that dries. Now the two little C hooks that we have to put on here, they don't have location holes, which is, I don't know why they've done that, because they've done location points for the others. So we're going to have to do them by eye. They're basically going into this bottom corner here. There we go, that's good. And I don't think we put any glue on that edge, the front edge, did we? So let me do that, and that makes sure we've got that nice and tight. Now this part seems to have leaned over at some point, and is now set in the wrong place. So I'm going to just try and loosen the part up. Just putting some extra thin, and because it's hot, it should allow us, there we go, to adjust it. There you go, that's straight now. So that should reset in the right place, I think. Just checking the angles, that all looks good. Right, okay, let's get these little hooks on now. I think we want to put that in my little vise first. Right, that's going to make sure that we've got both my hands free. And what we can do is we can spin this round, and as Ron would say, make gravity our friend. There we go. That's one on. We'll just give that a second, and then we can flip this right over. There we go. And then just a bit of belt and braces, but why not? And that's why. Right, we'll do it slightly differently. So just put some glue on the surface. It's a bigger area, so it flashes off a little slower. Now we'll just run some around the bottom. There we go. So we'll just make sure that the other side is nice and secure as well. There we go. Right, and that completes steps 89, 90, 91. So we're on the last page, but we do have to go back and do some things. So we've got the wheels, fuel cans, and the tools to do, yeah, but we've not finished on the turret as yet. So we're at this point here, 92. So okay, so that's the next thing to put in. So we might as well leave this on its stand because it's being quite helpful. Just going to move them out of my way. Okay. So we've got this strip to go on the back. Yeah, that's incorrectly. Making sure that our little recesses are facing downwards. So we've got one or two small parts left to go on, and sometimes I think people can find it a little bit difficult to clean up small parts. So just show you a little trick. I have already done this throughout the build, but I've not really talked about it. So with these small parts, when you're trying to clean them up, hold them in your fingers. Just doesn't work sometimes. So a good thing is to get a good clip, something like these here, and you know they've got a lot of spring on them, so I can put the part in there, and if I push on that, it ain't really moving. I've got to really put some effort in. So it's a really handy way of giving yourself something a bit bigger to purchase on while you tidy up your part. It's the best one in the world. Your fingers can just get in the way. Okay, so I've got several parts here that I need to clean up ahead of us doing the final parts on the turret. So I'm going to crack on with cleaning up the parts, and then when that is done, I will get back to you. We can work through the steps, glue the parts on, and then crack on with our final parts, clean up and sub-assembly. And you can see just how much easier that is, and quicker, because parts slip in your fingers and stuff. So there you go, that's how I clean up really small parts. These are really handy for all sorts of things, really. Right, I'll get back to you when this lot is cleaned up. Parts are all cleaned up, so that takes us back to step 93, which is putting in the parts onto this little back rail here. Sorry, step 92 I should say. So we've got 2 little brackets that stick out, which are these parts here. So let's get them in. These are basically the rest for the hinged door here that folds down. And basically what would happen is that the commanders, when they weren't in combat, they'd have the top piece open, which folds forward, and that piece down, and they would sit on it, because there wasn't a lot of space in there. So when they had an opportunity to not be too crammed in, that's what they did, which all makes sense to me. Must have been a little bit claustrophobic in there, I would have thought. And I imagine in places like Cyprus, it could get pretty warm in them. So you often see them driving around with everything that's openable open. And I bet it still wasn't enough. Now, have I got that the right way around? No, I haven't. I thought it didn't look right. There we go. I think that's the 3rd time on this build I've put something in upside down. Okay. Make sure I'm the right way around this time. Yeah. Okay, and then we've got a little hook that, again, there's no placement point for this, so you're doing this completely by eye. Where's my rule? I don't like doing things completely by eye though. So my distance between those two is 12, so 6 is my centre point. Right, there we go. So that's step 92 done. Step 93 is installation of this. Now, question is, am I going to have it open? And the answer is, I think I do want to have it open. So I want to just see how that fits. So in its closed position, right, okay. So in its opened position, right. So what we're going to have to do is look at fitting these parts loosely for painting. Because I want this open, but I want to be able to prime it and paint it at the old time, and I can use these parts to mask the interior by shutting it up. So just going to place that on there and say that's step 93 done. Okay, step 94 is the lid that goes on top, and we've got a couple of little bump stops to add on, so when it folds down they will rest on these brackets that we've just put on, and that should then make that sit nice and square. So let's get them in, make sure we get them the right way around. They have a slight slope on them. If you look at them, you can see the front leg is shorter than the back leg. So the front being where the hinges are. Now I'm going to guess that these were rubber. I need to see if I can find that out. I'm guessing they weren't. I'm guessing it's a metal bracket with like a little rubber blob on top to cushion it, so that you've got a little bit of shock resistance when you sat on it, and you can open it quietly. So in its open position, if I straighten that up, that is going to sit like that, which is how we will have it, but I want it closed for painting. There we go. Now if we can get that to sit right, we can paint all that in one go, and we've masked it at the same time. Because other than putting the lamp on, which we'll do in a sec, that's the turret done. So we'll come back to that in a moment. I have a method I've used before for holding things like that shut, but we'll take it off here to do that. Right, now I want to do the lamp on the side of the turret there. So the turret lamp is two parts. So this is step 95. We're not going to put the clear lens in. You could do. You could put the clear lens in and then mask it off, a bit of Mascol, or make yourself a bit of masking tape on it, whatever you want to do. But I'm going to paint the insides and put the lenses in after we've spray painted. It's just a bit less faffy, actually. I've done a brilliant job of cleaning that up, have I? There we go. So we've got what can only be a handle going on the back here. Okay, that's not going to hold in place. I'm going to have to put it in and then glue it. There we go. I'll just check that's nice and straight, and it is. Okay, so we can now install that in the side of our turret there. So we want to close this turret up, and the way to do that is a little spot of blue tack. Right, so we need to tack down these two lids. So what we're going to do is try and hold them in with a bit of blue tack. And we'll just make sure that's nicely stuck down. Obviously the fit doesn't have to be perfect, but it does have to make sure that we're not going to get any paint on the inside, because then you're touching up and it's just creating needless work, isn't it? So hopefully that's enough to hold that front one in. Join there. It's a very, very tight fit with the part. There we go. So that should all hold together nicely now, and we can paint that, but we do need to mask off the bottom as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the clip on it, and then we'll mask it off around that clip. Okay, that is our Ferret masked up and ready for painting. So obviously the next step is to get it primed. We've got one or two other things that I want to do first though. I want to build up the rest of it so we can prime everything in one go, and then we can start painting it ahead of final assembly. So this has come together quite quickly. It's a really nice little project. So my next step is wheels, I think. Well, that is it. That's the last sprue to pop in the old recycling bin, and those are the last parts for cleaning up. So I'm going to get these cleaned up, and then I'll come back to you when we're putting them together, just in case there's any learnings from that process. So I'm finding that the wheels are going together really well. You line up the pins, and there you have it, and there's no gaps. There is a little bit of play in them, tiny amount, so you get it lined up, and you don't need to take the nubs off until afterwards as part of your cleanup process, but you can just hold them together, pinch them together, get a little bit of liquid poly, in the joint and job's a good one. So we can just rely on capillary action to do all of what we need there, and you know they go together really nicely. So let that dry, and then we can come back and clean them up. Done the spare wheel as well. When we look at the fuel tanks, strangely, they have done one sort of a jerry can with a separate handle and a separate spout, which is in there somewhere. There it is. Spout is tiny. But then they've done one with the cap already on and a really blocky looking handle. So I don't know whether that's supposed to be perhaps a plastic container and not a jerry can. Perhaps. I'm guessing maybe. Different type of container perhaps, but yeah. So that's the one that we have to paint up black. So that will be interesting. Right, so again, this goes together really quite nicely without having to worry about removing the nubs. Although I think it's being held apart a little bit by this one, so I'm just going to trim that one back a little bit. There's my, there we go. Because sometimes it's not an issue at the actual part face, but as you travel up the length of the nub, it can be. So yeah, we can just spot a glue in there. And then we'll need to clean up the spout and the handle, and that's it. That's end of all the assembly really. We've got final assembly obviously, but all the parts are now built up, so it's just a matter of cleaning the remaining ones up. So I'm just looking at the shovel, and you can see there's quite a sizable lip going around it. So that you've got the taper, and then you've got a drop about 0.5 millimeter, I reckon, where the connection point is. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sand that away, which will make the shovel look thinner anyway, which I think will be a good thing, and give it a more authentic shape. It's probably the biggest weakness of this kit. This is the individual part that I like the least is the shovel. I think yeah, I think that is prime candidate for an etch shovel blade.